Welcome back. I have some good news. The good news is that you don't have to spend half the seminar taking notes frantically, because I forgot to mention in the very beginning that I already took all the notes. You might want to note down questions so you won't forget your questions. But all the points in each lesson, I have an outline form in a folder called Student Notes. And so I'll just send that, I'll just zip it over to Jesse, and then if you want the notes, you can just email him and he'll zip you over the notes. Otherwise, you miss half the seminar because we're taking notes. It's hard to keep up with what's going on. So, and then also I mentioned to Yogendra Prabhu that already I'm falling behind in time as far as giving you enough time for questions and answers. So I suggested that after the last lesson, which is Sunday the 20th, on Monday the 21st, we do one more class, and it's just an open question and answer period. So that'll round out the whole experience nicely. Because it's really all about the questions and answers. That's where everything gets solidified. So, today we're going to wrap up Srila, which in our case means deepening our relationship with Srila Prabhupada. Lesson 3, Srila Prabhupada, our founder Acharya. I call this the signature lesson of the series because it best represents the whole series out of all the lessons. In lesson 2, we examined the founder Acharya principle, its origin and historical development. In this lesson, we'll look at our own founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada, and how he realized and revealed his position as a service to his Guru Maharaj, to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and to all generations of his followers. So every time I have a slide to lead off the lesson, there's a reason for the slide. It's not just a nice picture, which it is. There we have another shot from the Bhaktivedanta Manor. In 1973, Prabhupada stayed there at the Manor during the summer for many, many weeks. There was some scheduling mix-up, or I forget exactly. Shyam Sundar was his secretary, and he explains it, and I forget what happened. But, that's right, yeah. He wanted Srila Prabhupada to stay at the Manor. And so he knew how to do that. He knew that if you just keep the VIPs coming, the people who have influence over the masses, that Prabhupada will stay and talk to them. So many, Arnold Toynbee, the famous historian, famous race car driver, I forget his name, Graham Hill, Donovan had darshan of Prabhupada. So many. The picture, you see Prabhupada at the Manor, and there's a nun, with her arms on her knees. She's getting Prabhupada's darshan. Just so many different kinds of people. What to speak of George Harrison, who donated the Manor, and he was getting Prabhupada's continued guidance. So here we have Prabhupada on the South Lawn again, appearing to be accepting a toy from a child. This again is 1973 summer. Now the point of the slide is that the child in the front of this slide is as eligible to have a foundational relationship with Srila Prabhupada as is Prabhupada's initiated disciple in the background. There we see Srimati Himavati, Mataji in the background, and there's a little girl. So if that little girl is with us today in that incarnation, she's in her late 40s. Now, she's not Prabhupada's initiated disciple, but she is just as eligible to have a foundational shiksha relationship with Prabhupada as is anybody, as you, me, or whatever. So again, that's our core identity. We're Prabhupada's shiksha disciples forever. He lives forever by his divine instructions, right? Sure, the initiation is divine. Sure, the form is divine because it's used in Krishna's service. but he really lives forever by his divine instructions, and everybody has equal access by Prabhupada's mercy to his instructions, his books. And from day one, even when there was nobody listening to him in America, we have that first recording, February 19th, 1966, Prabhupada sitting alone in a railroad car-shaped room that Dr. Mishra has kindly provided him. And what's he dictating? Introduction to the Gita. It's the beginning of the recording. It sounds like the primeval sounds of the universe, or at least the ISKCON universe. Om Bhagana Timarandhasya. And Prabhupada just does a whole Mangalacharya, and he just starts speaking what we know now as the introduction to the Gita. And he insisted, Prabhupada insisted, that he always be recorded. And when something went wrong with the recorder, in the beginning it was reel to reel, then he would stop. Because he knew the importance for posterity, for future listeners. So we're very grateful to Prabhupada for that, amongst so many other things. Now, sometimes what I do is, at this point, I say, in a few words, identify your relationship with Srila Prabhupada today. Why do I say that? So you can sort of mentally think, what's the essence of my relationship with Prabhupada? Like in 108 words or less. Why? Why do I say that? Because at the end of the seminar journey, after lesson 10, I revisit that question and ask you, how has this experience influenced your relationship with Srila Prabhupada? Hopefully for the better. So think about that. And when there's time, then I say, okay, you might be shy to say that, but I'll just tell you what my relationship is in 108 words or less, or just a few words really. And it's what I've already said, that my relationship with Srila Prabhupada is as his Shiksha follower. My identity as his Diksha disciple is secondary to my relationship as his Shiksha follower. That's again how he really lives forever. Because even if, like on, Saturday, July 17th, 1971, we drove up from Vrindavan and it was in Detroit, Michigan. Prabhupada gave me the name. Your name is Suresvara, it means controller of the demigods. You are Suresvara Das, you are servant of the controller. How many rounds?
6.
At least 16 rounds. What are the 4 rules? No intoxication, no illicit sex, no beating, no gambling. And as many devotees say at their initiation. And then I knew Prabhupada was looking right through me. But I was looking right at him, but I couldn't fathom who I was looking at, because to look at those deep brown soul eyes is like the ocean. So that combination of Prabhupada being unfathomable and then looking right through me at the same time was so stunning. I couldn't speak, I couldn't move. And Prabhupada saw that, so he took my beads and he rattled the beads in front of my nose. Like snap out of it, buddy, Go on, take your beads, go on. So then I grabbed down, and then later on, what's my name? That's a very common, report from the devotees. Okay, that's in a nutshell, I'm his Shiksha follower. So now what we're going to do, this is continuing the kind of history motif. Now we'll look at prophecies, both Puranic and Gaudiya, that Srila Prabhupada fulfilled. So, raise your hand if you can tell us where that scene is. Tompkins Square Park. There's Bruce and Chuck. Bruce became Ramananda, and Chuck, with his hair, with his back to us, he became Acharya. Okay, so most people don't know this, although it's been on the public record for now 22 years. In 1996, it was the first big Vyasa Puja book, oversized, coffee table sized Vyasa Puja book. And in the introduction to that book, the Centennial Minister Lokanath Maharaj wrote a nice piece based on ISKCON scholar research about Prabhupada's position as the founder of Acharya. And he ticked off a couple of prophecies. And so the first one was Puranic, and that's the key word. Who knows the 5,000-year-old Puranic prophecy that Srila Prabhupada fulfills? Anybody know? It was in that ISKCON book, and since then sometimes you hear it. It's from the Brahma Vaivarta Purana.
I know it in bits and pieces, so I hesitant to say, but Krishna was reassuring someone.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
Good. Ganga Devi, goddess Ganga.
Yeah. What about all the sins that are being placed?
Well, you're getting a little ahead.
Right, sorry.
So I'll just read what it is. Quote. Well, first of all, I'll say, although the trend. No, okay. Quote. Yeah, Ganga Devi. The situation is Ganga and all the holy rivers in India. They were really worried because they knew Krishna was winding up his manifest pastimes on earth. And so they were thinking, as soon as Krishna leaves, Kali Yuga is going to come on full force, and all these sinful people are going to dump all their bad karma, all their sins in our waters. Quote, O Lord, we can see that your pastimes are about to end, and people are becoming more and more materialistic. You have been very merciful to us. After you leave, however, all the sinful people of Kali Yuga will bathe in our waters, and we will become overwhelmed with sinful reactions. Smiling, the Lord replied, be patient. Alright, Astika Prabhu.
After 5,000 years, my mantra Upasak, worshipper of the holy name, will appear in this world and spread the chanting of my holy name everywhere.
You got to be really patient. 5,000 years, right? Be patient. And then there's more. Quote, not only in Bharatvarsh, but also all over the world, people will chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And because the devotees of Lord Hari are so pure, anyone who contacts them will become purified from sinful reactions. There's more, but so I'll say, Krishna is telling Ganga, yeah, my mantra Upasaka worship, he's going to take this all over the world. And he's going to inspire so many people to become pure devotees. And then they're going to come to Bharat, and then they're going to bathe in your waters, and they're going to purify you. So he turns like rhetorical judo. He uses the energy of the other person to defeat what the person is trying to do. So Ganga was complaining, yeah, they're going to pollute us. And Krishna said, no, they're going to the holy devotees are going to purify you because they've been inspired by my mantra Upasaka. These pure devotees will visit Bharatvarsha and purify you of sinful reactions by bathing in your sacred waters. Now, the last sentence of the prophecy is the only sentence in the story that Prabhupada told us. So when I read the sentence, and I know you know what it is, then you have to tell me why did Prabhupada only tell us this line? Alright? Here's the line. This period of worldwide chanting of Hare Krishna will continue for 10,000 years. That's the golden age. Prediction. So Prabhupada told us that. Where did he say that? He said it a few times, but the first time he said it to Allen Ginsberg in May '69 in Columbus. And Ginsberg asked if this chanting of Hare Krishna, which was getting popular, and he was one reason, was in the Shastras. And Prabhupada said, oh yes. He didn't give the exact reference, but he referred to it. And Prabhupada said 10,000 years. So why was that why didn't he give us the backstory behind it? With Ganga and Krishna and... It's not so hard. Yes?
Because he didn't want to glorify himself?
Yes, exactly. That's the caliber of our founder Acharya. He was always, what do I say? Note that Srila Prabhupada only told us the last line of this prophecy, not wanting to draw attention to himself as its fulfiller. Our founder Acharya was always absolutely transparent to Krishna, because all the Guru Swamis and yogis, all the other ones, they would come and then it was all about them. I'm the avatar, I'm the enlightened one. But Prabhupada, he was always just pointing people to Krishna. To this day, people are more likely to have heard of the Hare Krishna movement than its founder. They don't necessarily know Bhaktivedanta Swami, because Prabhupada was totally, utterly transparent to Krishna. So that's a Puranic prophecy. Now more people know the next one. Let's see. Who knows instead of 5,000, it's 500. Who knows the 500-year-old Gaudiya prophecy? Now we're not Puranic, it's Gaudiya. Gaudiya prophecy, Srila Prabhupada fulfilled. This is in Shastra. Wait.
Oh,
No, it's about Prabhupada, not about
No, the commander-in-chief.
Yes, gotcha. So it was a similar situation. Just as in the Brahma Vaivarta Purana, Ganga was worried about so much sins and being dumped in them, in their waters, and Krishna reassured her. So similarly, 500 years ago, it was recorded in a scripture called Sri Chaitanya Mangala by Srila Lochandas Thakur, who wrote Paramakarana, and he wrote this book, Sri Chaitanya Mangala. And so in that book, Lochandas Thakur, he describes how Narada Muni, he was concerned about our Kali Yuga, and how bad it's going to be. And so, Narada Muni is our hero. He's our eternal spaceman. He can travel anywhere. So he goes to Golok Navadvip, the Navadvip quarter of Golok, where Lord Chaitanya is internally doing his Sankirtan pastimes. And he waited till the kirtan was finished, it says, and then he approached Mahaprabhu. And let's see here. And he expressed that what are we going to do? This Kali, because Narada Muni, he has a vision of past, present, and future. It's Tri Kala Gyat. So he sees how bad it's going to get. So what to do? So Lord Chaitanya says, do not worry. With the powerful chopper of Nam Sankirtan, I will cut the hard knots of demoniac desires from the hearts of everyone. So Krishna doesn't kill, although that's equally auspicious. Like everyone in Kurukshetra was liberated. They were killed in the presence of the Lord. But Lord Chaitanya kills our demoniac desires with Nam, with Harinam. So he says, I will cut, with Nam Sankirtan, I will cut the hard knots of demoniac desires from the hearts of everyone. And then he said, Yadi papi charit dharma durideshe yoy mora senapati bhakta yaibe tatoy. So let's have our Dolly read here.
What
We're going to see
scriptural reference is that?
Sri Chaitanya Mangala.
Sri Chaitanya Mangala.
Yeah, by Lochandas Thakur. Okay, but we'll read that.
Even if the sinners reject religion or flee to foreign countries, I will send more Senapati Bhakta, my military field commander, to go there and deliver them.
And there's the reference. Sri Chaitanya Mangala and the exact section and verse, chapter verse. Okay, so who did that? Same. Not Mantra Upasaka, along with being the worshipper of the holy name, Lord Chaitanya sent his Senapati Bhakta. And Srila Prabhupada, when he walked among us, he was very much like that. Military field commander. Head held high, leading the pack, we couldn't keep up with him, giving perfect directions, strategies, go here, go there, do this, do that. He was very much like that. And in his books, like in the Gita, he would give these military images. One should execute Krishna consciousness as if in military discipline. As if, because the military in Kali Yuga is based on hatred and fear and politics. But this army is based on love. love. We out of love, ultimately, in the beginning maybe just out of duty, but out of love, we go out and we have a sing out. We have a Hare Krishna sing out, Nam Sankirtan, and distribute literature. And in so many ways, prasadam and festivals, we try to attract people to the mercy of Lord Chaitanya. Okay, so those are two prophecies. Now here's one that's most people know. Who knows the late 19th century prophecy Prabhupada fulfilled? Raise your hand.
Is that the one about every town and village?
Well, that's way back in Lord Chaitanya's time. That's in the Chaitanya Bhagavat. Prithivite Achayatana Adigram Sarvata Prachar Haive Moranam. And as many towns and villages as there are on the surface of the earth, my holy name will be preached. But it wasn't happening, because it was driven underground for hundreds of years. It was disgraced by so many Upasampradayas. But finally, when our hero Bhaktivinoda Thakur exposed the Upasampradayas and he revealed the pure path again of bhakti, then what did Bhaktivinoda?
He saw a beautiful temple with citizens from all across the world chanting together.
That's connected. It was a little separate. It was all in Sajjana Toshini, but specifically about Prabhupada. What did it say? Soon there will appear. Let's have you read it, Gokul.
A personality will soon appear in order to preach the teachings of Sri Chaitanya and move unrestrictedly over the whole world with his message.
Yeah, Bhaktivinoda, such a visionary. Navakirtan Mahatmya, that vision we described yesterday. And he saw the Adbhuta Mandir rising across the Jalangi, and everybody's coming from all over the world to chant Jai Sachinandana Gaura Hari. And then he predicted Prabhupada's appearance. And Prabhupada himself, who was very keen on this kind of spiritual history, he said during one Disappearance Day lecture for his Guru Maharaj, famous quote, he, 1896, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, wanted to introduce this Krishna consciousness movement by sending this book, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, His Life and Precepts. Fortunately, that year was my birth year, and by Krishna's arrangement, Guru Maharaj and I came in contact. I was born in a different family, my Guru Maharaj was born in a different family. Who knew that I will come to his protection? Who knew that I would come in America? Who knew that you American boys will come to me? These are all Krishna's arrangement. We cannot see how things are taking place. So Bhaktivinoda actually spoke and published this phrase. In Sajjana Toshini, circa 1885, 11 years before he sent that Sri Chaitanya His Life and Precepts book to McGill University in Montreal. He actually had correspondence with Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Wow.
He sent, it was the Sri Krishna Samhita in Sanskrit, because Srila Bhaktivinoda heard that scholarly Americans were really keen on Sanskrit, and as we know, as we distribute our Gita, they were reading the Gita in some British translation, so Bhaktivinoda, he was reaching out to them. And so Emerson got the book in Cambridge, and then he wrote back. There was a return address, and he said, "This is great. Do you have anything in English?" Because he couldn't read Sanskrit. So that inspired Bhaktivinoda Thakur to write Sri Chaitanya His Life and Precepts in English and send it abroad, because the Thakur could read and write in English, Sanskrit, Hindi, Bengali, I think Oriya. Yeah, he was quite a genius. Okay, so Prabhupada is very keen on that. He could see the evolution of Mahaprabhu's desires coming to fruition. So having heard prophecies Prabhupada fulfilled, we will now look at how Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu set the world stage over 5 centuries to send his Senapati Bhakta, his military field commander. to just the right place, at just the right time, to launch the Krishna consciousness movement worldwide. So this is a bit of a historical sweep. Let's see. You want to read? Can you see? I didn't bring your book. All right.
I got glasses on if you want to borrow.
Who wants to read? Madhava Priya. Can you read this? This set.
That caption?
Yeah, read the
How
caption.
did Lord Chaitanya set the world stage for Mahaprabhu's? It's really hard to read, it's thin words.
Okay.
Srila Prabhupada's advent.
And so here's how Mahaprabhu set the world stage over 4 or 5 centuries. There you go.
Continue?
Yeah.
In the 16th century, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Sankirtan movement ignited a bhakti revival throughout India.
Yeah, as we know, Advaita Acharya is praying, please come, the place is being overrun by Mayavadis, Karmakandis, just upper sampradayas, atheists. And so Lord Chaitanya came and he revealed, as we mentioned last night, Svabhakti Shriyam, the most intense, beautiful expression of bhakti, conjugal love of God. And then,
Continue. During the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, when Lord Chaitanya's movement was forced underground in India, the age of discovery and the Industrial Revolution brought technology and new horizons to Europe.
yeah, as Mahaprabhu was igniting a spiritual renaissance, in the West, there was a kind of material renaissance. Many folks in Europe were throwing off the shackles of a corrupt church, and Mahaprabhu was encouraging everyone to explore inner space, if you will, in the core of the heart. There's this relationship with the Supreme that's lying dormant, and you can even have the Lord as your lover. So in the West, they were reaching into outer space, Galileo with the telescope, and then sailing ships all over the world, discovering new lands, and industrial revolutions came in, and it's continued to this day. Communications and transportation keeps. Now it's reached its limits, and we see what happens when it just runs amok. This kind of material expansion, climate change and pollution, and just the whole modern mess. But this was Lord Chaitanya's arrangement that while his movement had to go underground for 100 years, in the West, arrangements were being made so that when Lord Chaitanya would send his Senapati Bhakta, he could use all those communications and transportation to go all over the world and spread it to every town and village. And now laptop, right? Every device. There's a lady here who read all of Prabhupada's books on her phone before she came.
Yeah, she's over there.
There you are. Yeah, so this is amazing. You probably read more than I had for Prabhupada's book. Okay, so then, as finally in the 20th century, I think there's more. Yeah, there's more. Madhava Priya.
In the late 19th century, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur rediscovered Lord Chaitanya's pure teachings and envisioned a worldwide movement of Krishna consciousness.
Yeah, the Thakur was looking all over for a copy of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. He couldn't find it. Finally, he found an old copy in Orissa. It was in Oriya. And then, single-handedly restored the good name of Bhakti, which the Bhadralok, the Bengali aristocracy, wouldn't touch it because they thought it was just, debauched. Okay, that was the late 19th, and then...
In the early 20th century, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's Gaudiya mission revived Krishna consciousness in India and sent the first Vaishnava preachers abroad.
Yeah, he advanced it further. And we'll take a look at that more next lesson. And then in the 1960s, Lord Chaitanya made some amazing fine-tuning historical arrangements. Okay?
In the 1960s, when Srila Prabhupada sailed to the West, the Roman Catholic Church eased its attitude toward other faith traditions, the USA relaxed its Asian immigration laws, and the American counterculture began to look to the East for truth.
Amazing. Simply amazing. Time window. in 1961, Pope John the 23rd, he convened Vatican II, the Second Ecumenical Council. And the resolution that came out of that 4 years later, in 65, the very year Prabhupada sailed to the West, for our purposes, was that for the first time the Roman Catholic Church dropped its claim of exclusivity. They no longer claimed they were the only way, that God could reveal himself through other faith traditions. So that gave very powerful psychological permission to Roman Catholics worldwide to read, for example, the Buddha, or anybody, and appreciate how God was revealing himself in that way. So, and then, that was a religious adjustment, and then there was a political adjustment. Asians weren't allowed to come between 45 and 65 because Japan had been our adversary in the war, and even there was a scandalous, locking up of Japanese during the war in internment camps, which is now coming to the fore again with these immigrant detention centers. So it was just sort of a vestige, a leftover from that. The U.S. government wasn't allowing any new Asians. And then finally in 65 they relaxed that. And then Asian people started to come. It was the beginning of the great Indian diaspora. Indian folks, for example, started going all over the world and doing business. And the Patel motels, and now the IT, like that. So Prabhupada came. He was able to come. And eventually, with a little endeavor, he was able to get a permanent residency in America. But the biggest one was the cultural adjustment Lord Chaitanya made. Those of us who are still around will remember it. We were all looking to the east, journeying to the east. And who were our Pied Pipers? Many, but chief among them were the Beatles. So we first heard the sitar on Norwegian wood, and then we heard it in
Within You Without You.
Huh?
Within You Without You.
Within You Without You, that was in Sgt. Pepper, but before that was Tomorrow Never Knows, you heard that. And then when the Beatles have a hard time, when their manager dies, Brian Epstein, and then they start looking for meaning, real meaning in life. It's like the press would always say to John, "Hey, what's it with George? He's so quiet. He's so quiet." And it became the quiet Beatle, right? So John said, "Oh, George, he's a simple lad, but it's the mystery inside George that's fascinating to watch." So when Epstein passed away, they were really like orphans for a while. So they were really ripe and first they went to the Maharishi, right? He was in Wales in 67 after Sgt. Pepper. They were visiting the Maharishi. And then they followed George to Rishikesh, right? And then they got disappointed by the Maharishi. But then finally they got Prabhupada's darshan in 69, in September, at Tittenhurst. So many of us old-timers can report that we were following the Beatles, and then we followed, at least I did, followed George's vibration especially, right to Prabhupada's lotus feet. Wow, this is all the arrangements of Krishna. We cannot see how things are taking place. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, so Prabhupada came to the West in 65, and let's see. Having heard prophecies Prabhupada fulfilled, we already did that. Oop. So, yes, Lord Chaitanya set the world stage. I mean, when I tell young people today, I said, can you imagine a whole generation of people looking to the East and leaving en masse, what they grew up with in terms of education and career and can you imagine that? They couldn't. But that's Lord Chaitanya's arrangement. So when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sent Srila Prabhupada to America, the first thing Prabhupada did was live among and study Americans, his first Western audience, beginning at Butler, PA. And then when Prabhupada went to New York, he was doing this. He was writing letters. To whom? These godbrothers. I'm here. Alone in America, Srila Prabhupada aimed to revive Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's Gaudiya mission. That's what he intended to do. He didn't intend to start anything new, become the founder Acharya of anything new. He wanted to revive the mission. So he was writing letters, lots of letters. If you have the database and you go into letters, pre-USA correspondence, and you see all these letters. Now, if you only have time to read one letter, read November 8, 1965, his letter to Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj, because this really captures what he was trying to say to them. Because what Prabhupada saw in New York is the Ramakrishna mission had reinvented itself in America as the Vedanta Society. And Prabhupada's telling his godbrothers, these naive Americans, they're looking to the East for truth, but they're getting totally fooled and cheated by these mind bodies. And they got $1 million skyscraper. We need $1 million skyscraper. And he's going to tell Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj now of what he's prepared to do. Okay, so how about... And I highlighted the word cooperate, different forms of the word cooperation. How about Jesse?
So here's a chance for cooperation between us, and I shall be glad to know if you are ready for this cooperation. I came here to study the situation, and I find it very nice. And if you are also agreeable to cooperate, it will be all very nice by the will of Srila Prabhupada.
Bhaktisiddhanta.
If you agree, then take it for granted that I am one of the workers of the Sri Mayapur Chaitanya Math.
Which was the month that Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj was in charge of. It was kind of the flagship of the old Gaudiya Math. So go ahead.
I have no ambition for becoming the proprietor of any month or mandir, but I want working facilities.
Yeah. You can be in charge. I'm your worker. Prabhupada, long before the corporate culture talked about servant leader, Prabhupada he's a servant leader. Look, I can recruit people, I can organize, we just need funds. And you, Maharaj, he said elsewhere in the letter, by the grace of Prabhupada, you have those Calcutta Marwaris, big businessmen, crore-patis, big wealthy. You have them in the palm of your hand. He was the mover and the shaker in the Gaudiya Math who organized so much fundraising. Kunja Babu, it was Kunja Babu. So Prabhupada knew he had ability to fundraise, and he also knew that he had the ability, he had connections in Delhi, and the government house in Delhi, to get those rupees released as dollars. Because India did not like to release money for foreign work, because they were a developing country, they wanted to, use the money themselves to build. So what was the response? At first, Tirtha Maharaj, he sent a kind of polite acknowledgement that possibly maybe I could help you, and then after that it was avoidance. Yeah. The only one who actually helped Prabhupada in those days a little bit was Sripad Narayan Maharaj, who sent the first Mridanga, which showed up on the west coast in March '67, and some incense. There's correspondence. Prabhupada saying, where's the drums? Where's the incense? Because Narayan Maharaj, he was the Ritvik Acharya when his sannyas guru, Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj, was awarding Prabhupada sannyas in 1959. Narayan Maharaj was doing the fire ceremony. Okay. So they had a relationship as uncle and nephew. Okay, so, yeah, not much response. Between the fall of 1965, there was one too, where a brahmachari in the Gaudiya Math wanted to come, but his Guru Maharaj wouldn't let him come. And the brahmachari quoted his Guru Maharaj as saying, of course, if your project is not authorized, then it is ludicrous. So Prabhupada wrote back to this brahmachari and said, ludicrous? This is what we're all supposed to do. Remember? This is what Srila Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur asked us to do. Cooperate and preach in the West and take it all over the world, revive India. So this is not my personal enterprise. Prabhupada was so incredulous at the attitude. So, between the fall of 1965 and the summer of 1966, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu showed Prabhupada that almost no help would come from India, that he would have to start a fresh branch of the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, and that he was being uniquely empowered to inspire and lead international devotees as their founder Acharya. Thus, Srila Prabhupada went from obscurity, nobody knew him when he came, but in 66 he became Swamiji, and there it is, the matchless gifts. Of course, that's image is a little, like collage is a little anachronistic because you have one of the twin towers here, and that wasn't even around then. Artist license. But there's, matchless. There's the first deity, if you will, painting Jadharani, painted Panchatattva. Although actually her original was a much, beginner's form of that. But that was they first worshipped Panchatattva. Okay, so let's see. John, can you read that?
Mostly neglected by his godbrother, Srila Prabhupada was obliged to found a fresh branch of the Gaudiya Sampradaya on July 13, 1966 in New York City. He incorporated the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, ISKCON, signing the papers only with the sannyasi name A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami.
Yeah, only this, because Prabhupada knew that he could have just dropped his whole position and mission on these newcomers. He was just trying to get them to learn how to be human beings. So he just let them call him Swamiji, which is a kind of an affectionate term, but it really wasn't befitting his position. But at least he went from obscurity to Swamiji. And then Prabhupada, as we know, he started ISKCON and he initiated his first disciples, and then in January 67 he took his first airplane ride to the West Coast because Mukunda and Janaki, his wife, they had planned to go to India, but Prabhupada planted the seed in Mukunda's mind as Mukunda was leaving for the West Coast, or leaving, first to go see his friends on the West Coast, and then they were going to go to India. And Mukunda said to Swamiji, San Francisco, that's another very fertile place. Just like the Lower East Side here in New York City. It's a good place for a temple. So he just said that going out the door, but Swamiji said, try to start a temple there. Intercepting Mukunda's plans to go to India. And that's exactly what happened. If you read the Rhino book or the Miracle on Second Avenue, So Prabhupada did that. He went out to the West Coast, big thing. He started the mission out there. Then he came back in April, and then in May, something horrendous happened. Prabhupada had a heart attack and a stroke. And the devotees were shocked because they just, even though Prabhupada was elderly, they kind of just began to take it for granted that Prabhupada is like Superman. He's elderly, he's up half the night translating. He's leading the charge to the parks and Sankirtan. He's just preaching like anything, cooking, he's doing the cooking, and it was like the wonder that was Swamiji. And then all of a sudden, just before Memorial Day, in May 67, he's getting dizzy, and he's having heart palpitations, and he's in his room, and Kirtanananda's in his room with him. And Prabhupada throws up his arms, Hare Krishna, and he falls back in Kirtananda's arms. And then they called doctors, but it was Memorial Day, so no doctor was available. Finally, they found one old doctor who came and examined Swamiji and said, the old man prays too much. He didn't know what to make of Prabhupada. They took Prabhupada to Beth Israel Hospital, if you know the drama, and then Prabhupada said after a few days, get me out of here, they're not helping. And they did. And then to help Prabhupada recover, because he was getting a little better, they took him down to Long Branch, New Jersey, the Jersey Shore. But the weather, even though it was early June now, the weather wasn't cooperating. It was kind of blustery, it was chilly. And so Prabhupada's corresponding with the devotees in the West Coast, and they're saying, oh, Swamiji, come out to sunny California, and we're sure you'll get better here, and we're going to have the first Rath Yatra, because Prabhupada had planted the seed of Rath Yatra out there. So the doctors gave Prabhupada the go-ahead to take a plane ride, so in early July, 67, Prabhupada flew out there, and they took him to another beach house, Stinson Beach, El Paradiso, a bungalow not far from San Francisco, but it was up mountain roads. It wasn't good for Prabhupada. And he stayed at Stinson Beach. And again, he ran into the same problem with the weather, because does anybody live in the San Francisco area?
Yes.
Cool.
It's perpetual autumn. It's blustery. And Mark Twain is famous for saying the coldest winter I ever spent was a summer in San Francisco. Right? So again, the sun would rise over the mountains late, and then it would go down early. It was windy, it was chilly. And then on Rath Yatra Day, July 9th, Prabhupada couldn't even go. He was too weak. So 3 people stayed back with him in this little beach bungalow. It was Mukunda, and Hayagriva, and Kirtanananda. And Prabhupada's openly saying, I have to go back to India to recoup. If I'm going to get better, I need India's heat, I need its massage people, Ayurvedic masseurs, I need Ayurvedic medicine. This is what I have to do. And they're getting really worried, because what happens if Swamiji doesn't come back? What happens if he passes away? So Hayagriva and Kirtanananda, the way Mukunda Maharaj tells it, kind of forced him to ask Swamiji a question he didn't really want to ask. Stinson Beach, July 1967. Okay, so I think we first of all we go this way. Yes, there's the question. I wants to read. Prabhu, want to read that? No.
When you die, what will happen to the movement? I asked. Will you have a successor who will continue your work and look after our spiritual education?
This is all recorded in Miracle on 2nd Avenue. Mukunda Maharaj continues. As I heard myself say the words, I realized it had been a mistake to ask this. The Swami sat silently, looking out the window at the sand dunes and the mountains. It was high tide, and I could hear the waves pounding the beach. Gulls shrieked. The Swami muttered something quietly. I couldn't hear what you said, Swami, I said carefully. Can you repeat it? And here's what Prabhupada said. Read that.
Actually, it is an insult to the spiritual master, he said.
He turned away from the window and looked at me pensively, as if he was hurt by my question. I'm sorry, Swami, I said. I felt like shrinking into the carpet. He closed his eyes. Outside a dog barked. A shallow stream of tears appeared below each of his eyes and flowed over his cheeks. He slowly wiped them away. And Prabhupada says something amazing here. My spiritual master, he said, and his voice choked to gravel. I was stunned. What had I done? And then read that.
My spiritual master, he said, he was so ordinary spiritual master.
He was no ordinary.
He was no ordinary spiritual master. He paused again and then worshipped
Whispered.
Whispered falteringly. Okay. He saved me.
He saved me. So that was Prabhupada's response to Mukunda's question. Now, luckily, in the Hare Krishna explosion, Hayagriva revisits that incident and gives us the purport, because later on in the day, Prabhupada he recalled this exchange, and here is what Hayagriva writes. So,
What did Hayagriva write? Oh, in the Hare Krishna explosion.
What did he write?
I was wondering where he wrote it.
Where he wrote it?
It says the Hare Krishna explosion.
Well, it was probably never done when he wrote it.
No, what was it in? He saw his answer right there.
He was
Okay,
wondering-
this is the Hare Krishna explosion afterward, and the first one was Mukunda Maharaj's Miracle on 2nd Avenue, right there. So that exchange is recorded in Miracle on 2nd Avenue and in the Lilamrita. And this, afterward, which gives the purport of that exchange, is in the Hare Krishna explosion. So, Yugendra, you want to read that?
Later, Swamiji tells us what we should have always known. There is no one to replace him. The very idea is insulting. If someone comes and tells you something different, he says, you will be confused.
You will be confused. And here, I got a little more here. In his book, Hare Krishna Explosion, Hayagriva Prabhu offers a similar account of the same incident, as well as Prabhupada's crucial reflection later. In both accounts, Prabhupada refers to his Guru Maharaj as, quote, no ordinary spiritual master. Remember back in lesson 2, we heard about the difference between a regular guru and a great Acharya. Not all gurus are one. They're one in message, but they're very different in one way by qualification. So Prabhupada's saying no ordinary spiritual master. Neglected by his godbrothers. Prabhupada's already been disappointed by them back in the 30s and now in the 60s. Neglected by his godbrothers, Prabhupada knows and is now disclosing that he is being uniquely empowered to lead the new international devotees as the foundational spiritual master of a fresh branch of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's, quote, desire tree of devotional service, unquote. That's from CC. So, by dint of Prabhupada's absolute, complete, unprecedented surrender, he's being uniquely empowered to know how to bring these people like me, to devotional service from sex, drugs, rock and roll, the depths of Tamaguna. And he knows his godbrothers can't do that because although they are exalted Vaishnavas, they ultimately didn't do what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta wanted them to do. Now at the same time, Prabhupada didn't want us, and doesn't want us today to get an attitude toward his godbrothers. So just a few months after that incident in July 67, Prabhupada wrote a couple of letters. I'm going to quote one of them. He wrote Brahmananda in New York, who was the New York TP, temple president. Despite non-cooperation from and differences with his godbrothers, later that year, Prabhupada made the following observation in a letter to the president of the New York City Temple. Quote, even amongst our godbrothers, we have misunderstanding, but none of us is astray from the service of Krishna. My Guru Maharaj ordered us to execute his mission combinedly. Unfortunately, we are now separated, but none of us have stopped preaching Krishna consciousness. Even if there was misunderstanding amongst the godbrothers of my Guru Maharaj, none of them deviated from the transcendental loving service of Krishna. So then I say, Prabhupada wanted us to be respectful to his godbrothers, everlastingly our seniors, and at the same time, not seek guidance from those who had fragmented his Guru Maharaj's mission. By dint of his absolute surrender to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's order, Srila Prabhupada was being uniquely empowered to communicate Lord Chaitanya's mission worldwide to all who strictly follow his teachings. So the above incident further set the stage for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to reveal Swamiji as Srila Prabhupada. So 65, obscurity, 66, Swamiji, 67, I say only he, after the only he could lead them, volume in the Lilamrita, and now 68, from Swamiji to Prabhupada. You might know this story because Govinda Dasi's been here?
A little bit.
A little bit? Did she ever tell us?
She came when Prabhupada came and she visited at a cow festival 2 years ago.
Did she tell the story of how
No,
she was a
that's
catalyst?
not
Okay. Okay, it's on the following Srila Prabhupada DVD, number 1, I believe. Yadavar is a nice series. So here's how it happened. So it's July 67, only and then you fast forward 10 months to May 68, Prabhupada's in Boston. His first visit, well, second, because he got off the ship for an hour in September 65 with Captain Pandya. Captain Pandya had a little shopping to do in Boston when the ship docked. And he took Prabhupada with him to show him a few of the sights. And then they got back on the ship and he went down to New York. But when Prabhupada was leading the movement in 68, he came to Boston to visit the devotees at their first place on 95 Glenville Avenue. And Prabhupada said, it's time to have second initiation. Some of you have been initiated for a while, it's time we did second. So Prabhupada did that. After ISKCON's first Brahmin initiation in Boston in the spring of 1968, Govinda Dasi recalls how Swamiji became Srila Prabhupada. All along everyone knew him as Swamiji. This is up until May of 68. So, Gaur-Sundar, my husband, they were a team serving Prabhupada. Gaur-Sundar, the man, was Prabhupada's personal servant, and Govinda was his personal secretary. So, husband and wife team. That's, that was the first, well, not the first, but they were the first servants of note. So Govinda says, so Gaur-Sundar, my husband, decided he wanted to call me Govindaji. Because Gaur-Sundar he's a bright guy, and he was dabbling in Sanskrit, and he learned that Ji is a term of affection. And sometimes you read in Prabhupada's books, Prabhupada referring to Vyasadeva as Vyasaji, and Narada Muni as Naradaji. So he wanted to call me Govindaji, and so he asked Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, no, actually Ji is a third-class form of address. It's better not to call her Govindaji. So I piped up. Govinda, she's a straight shooter, right? So, and Prabhupada allowed a very familiar relationship, almost like grandfather-granddaughter. So she just spoke her mind. She said, so I piped up. I was sitting right in front of him, and I said, well, if it's a third-class form of address, Ji, why are we calling you Ji? Why are we calling you Swamiji? And he said, now this is Prabhupada's initial reaction. He said, it's not very important. But Govinda wouldn't take that for an answer. And so Lord Chaitanya is now setting up a critical moment here. It's not very important. I said, oh no, it's very important. If it's a third-class form of address, then we don't want to call you that. So let's have a lady read. What lady would like to read Govinda's exchange with Prabhupada here? Okay, Evalia. There you go.
We want to call you the most first-class form of address. So tell us what would be a good name for us to call you by. And he was very humble, very reluctant, but I pressed him. We've got to change this. And he said, you can call me Gurudev, or Guru Maharaj, or Prabhupada. So I said...
So just pause for a minute. So you see what's going on. Now, again, it's coming from his disciples. Just like it came from his disciples when Wamapati said, so what is it about the rules again? Could you remind us of the rules? So when Prabhupada saw it was coming from them, then he was ready to give it, because they were ready. So now they want to call him something better. Prabhupada didn't insist, because he's very humble and he knows he's smart, he's very intelligent, he knows it has to come from his disciples. So he just throws out a few names here. He floats 3 names. So I said...
Well, that's 3. We need 1. So which one is the best? And he answered, Srila Prabhupada is nice. That is the best. So I said, from today you will be called Srila Prabhupada.
Govinda Dasi ki. So then Govinda says, so I told all the devotees. Some of the devotees didn't like it, because it's kind of a tongue twister, Prabhupada. and Swamiji kind of flows more easily. But we gradually started calling him Srila Prabhupada from that time. Yeah. So that's so obscurity, Swamiji, only he, now it's Prabhupada. And then you fast forward to the month I joined in July 70, so that's 26 months, maybe 68, yeah. So then, I didn't know it because I was brand new, but that month was the very month that Prabhupada created the GBC, created the BBT, because what was going on was some heavy stuff was going on. There was some minimization of Prabhupada's position coming from India. And it was affecting some of Prabhupada's closest disciples. So, and Prabhupada knew exactly what was going on. So he did some things. In the spring of 70, he gave his pranam mantra, Namaste Saraswati Devi, the second mantra. And then in July, he approached some of his senior trusted people, which meant they were around for maybe a year or two, or 3, right? And he said, I want to form a governing body. And of course, this is coming from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, per Bhaktivinoda Thakur's vision. Governing body commission, it came from Indian Railways. They had a governing body commission. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur appropriated that and said, yes, for a worldwide mission, we'll need a governing body. It's not just about one guru or a few gurus. There's going to have to be tons of gurus, but they're all going to have to be supervised by a governing body. So Prabhupada says to a few people, about a dozen people, most of them householders at that time, would you join me? Would you join me on a governing body? And they were prepared to do anything, sure. So there's another South Lawn, Bhaktivedanta Manor, 73 summer picture. But Prabhupada liked this so much, he actually told the BBT that you can use this as a founder Acharya picture. And they do that in the books and different literatures. So on July 28th, let's see who would like to read this one. Gokul?
On July 28, 1970, when Srila Prabhupada legally established a governing body commission to manage ISKCON, especially after his demise, he formally identified his relationship to his mission.
So here is where we first see, actually not the first, mysteriously in some of the early BTGs, when they were just really kind of crude but very devotional, you see this phrase once or twice, but now in an official document, Directions of Management, you see Prabhupada identify himself. Read that.
International Society for Krishna Consciousness Incorporated, founded Acharya, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada.
Yeah, of course we didn't know what that meant, really. We didn't know founder Acharya from the man in the moon, but at least Prabhupada's putting it down legally. On the day Prabhupada formed a governing body to manage ISKCON, with Prabhupada, of course, as their tutor, he was grooming people to take over the management. Not to replace him, but to at least take over the management. Actually, he was begging them, right, to take over the management practically from day one, or at least from 71 or 72. Now you can take over the management and let me retire and translate. But it never happened. Right up to the end, if you hear the 77 recordings, Prabhupada's managing it from his disappearance fed. And, the translation was slowing to a trickle, but he was still doing it if you've seen the films. Determined that ISKCON not suffer the fate of his Guru Maharaj's mission, Prabhupada began training governing body commissioners to manage the society after his departure. And if something should happen to ISKCON, the next day, which was July 29th, he separately incorporated his publishing house, the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, so Krishna consciousness would continue to spread. Because Prabhupada lived through that breakup, the fragmentation of the Gaudiya mission, and one faction of the Gaudiya Math people actually sold Srila Bhaktisiddhanta one of his printing presses to get money to continue litigation in court of who was to own the assets of the Gaudiya mission. So it was so bad, it was such an offense to do that. In the first place, they were all unauthorized to litigate. Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta didn't want that. We'll go into that in the next lesson. But they sold the press, so Prabhupada separately incorporated the BBT. If anything should happen to the organization, the books would still be published amongst those who were faithful to that. And it would continue to go into the mainstream of society. Now that was 70. I joined in 70. And there was a lot of problems still. There was some minimization going on. We'll revisit that, or visit that. And Prabhupada was still being minimized. Even on the cover of his books, Brahmananda, who at that time was in charge of the press, when I joined in Boston in 1970, we were coming out with the second canon in paperback chapters. If you've seen any of those chapters. And so one day, Brahmananda gave the latest chapter to Prabhupada in Los Angeles, and Prabhupada opened it. First on the cover, to identify the author, it was A.C. Bhaktivedanta. No Swami, no His Divine Grace, no Prabhupada, no nothing. So Prabhupada was disturbed by that. Then he opened it up, and the spine snapped, and the pages went flying all over the place. It was very symbolic of what was happening to the Shraddha of some of the leaders. So Prabhupada was furious. When I joined in 70, I lived in the basement with Petit Udaran, who became Petita Pavana, the astrologer who lives in Bulgaria with, what's her name? She starts with an A. Anyway, they're a good team. So he was a brahmachari he was the bookbinder. You know how the books were being bound? Abhay Mudra. That's right, Abhay Mudra. So the books were stacked up and glued. Petit would glue the binding, and by the force of gravity, the glue was pressing on the books, and that's how the books were bound. It was so amateur. So that's why some of those old books, very soon after they were distributed, the pages would fall apart because the binding was so bad. But in letters to Prabhupada, temple presidents they weren't writing on ISKCON stationery; it was their own personal stationery. And when the BBT finally got its own building in LA, there was nothing on the building identifying what the building was for. No Bhaktivedanta Book Trust or no founder Acharya. And what other things? There was a lot of minimizations, little signs of that creeping in. So 4 years later, in 1974, something really happened. It was kind of the last straw. A temple president, unbeknownst to the devotees, sold the temple one fine day, took the money and ran. Because it was in his name. It wasn't even in ISKCON's name. So this is in the summer of 74 when Prabhupada, what did he do here? Neglect of his position had appeared in documents, letterheads, publications, on buildings, and in defiant actions, like the unauthorized sale of a temple, whose president vanished with the proceeds. One measure of our understanding and appreciation of Prabhupada's position today is how we present him on our websites and social media, official or otherwise. So Prabhupada should be very prominent on our home pages as the founder Acharya. It's getting a little late, but I have an anecdote in that regard. But we should do that. We should make Prabhupada very prominent. Now, interestingly, that same summer, so when that last straw happened in 74, then Prabhupada said, okay, GBC, now we have to have an amendment to this directions of the management. And what Prabhupada had to do legally was reassert his position as the founder Acharya, and what that meant. So, David.
On July 22nd, 1974, Srila Prabhupada drafted an amendment to his earlier management document, reasserting his supreme position in ISKCON.
And here's how it read.
It is declared that His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, is the founder Acharya of ISKCON, International Society for Krishna Consciousness. He is the supreme authority in all matters of the society. His position cannot be occupied by anyone else, and his name and title must appear on all documents, letterheads, publications, and buildings of the society.
Okay, that's what Prabhupada did officially, that's summer of 74. But you know what Prabhupada was translating in the summer of 74? CC. And right in CC, we get Prabhupada's internal mood. Here's the external, this is my position. He's not doing it out of vanity or whatever. He's just doing it to protect ISKCON. Now in CC, we're going to look at a passage. Yeah, okay. So, Srila Prabhupada as Saraswat. This is how Prabhupada's identifying himself in CC. Any other readers from the far reaches? Can you see? Yeah. Okay. You want to read? So I'll help you with the Sanskrit.
The same year, 1974, even as Srila Prabhupada was
reasserting
his position as ISKCON's former
founder Acharya,
while he was translating the Sri Chaitanya
Charitamrita.
He also presented his and our disciplic
obedience
and service.
He asserted, reasserted his and our disciplic obedience and
service to his own spiritual master in the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Yeah, listen to how Prabhupada is identifying himself and us as his followers in relation to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta.
As members of the Krishna consciousness movement, we belong to the family or disciplic succession of Saraswati Goswami, and thus we are known as, I can't see it.
Saraswatas. It's kind of like Arjuna, he's called Kaunteya because he's the son of Kunti. It's a form of the word. So we're coming in disciplic succession from Bhaktisiddhanta, we're Saraswats, Prabhupada says.
Obeisances are therefore offered to the spiritual masters as
Saraswat Deva.
Saraswat Deva, or a member of the Saraswat family.
Okay, and then here's how Prabhupada ends it. This is his pranam mantra. Namaste Saraswati Deve.
Whose mission is to broadcast the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Gauravani Pracharane.
And to fight with impersonalists and voidists.
Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshacharya. It's right in the CC. Even as externally he's proclaiming his supreme authority in ISKCON, this is his mood. We're disciplic, how do I put it here? We are...
disciplic obedience?
Yeah, by founding ISKCON, Srila Prabhupada had made a clean break from the non-cooperation that had fragmented Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's Gaudiya mission. At the same time, Srila Prabhupada was now reasserting his and our absolute dependence on and fidelity to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur as disciplic executors of Lord Chaitanya's mission. Now we're ending these slides. Over the next 2 slides, Srila Prabhupada offers a striking analogy to deepen our understanding of his position as ISKCON's founder Acharya. This took place in February 75, the next year, during what we identified yesterday as Prabhupada's one and only visit to the continent of South America in Venezuela, in Caracas in February, just before he flew to Miami. And Prabhupada's lecturing on Bhagavatam 111, identifying the absolute truth as Sri Krishna. This is what Vyasadeva did. And let's see, how about Katya? Yeah.
Srila Prabhupada himself is ISKCON's founder Acharya. So here it is said that origin is life, because here it is said,
Yatod vayadi tadatascha arteshu abhigyaksvara. This is Vyasadeva's proclamation of who the absolute truth is. And that means
he is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations and he is independent.
okay, so that's Lord Krishna. He's the source of all, he is independent, he knows everything. So now we're going to hear audio. It's ready, huh? Okay. We're going to hear audio of Prabhupada making an analogy just as Krishna is the knower of the creation, so he is founder Acharya. Whoops, what happened? Oh, it's up here. So I've got to see what happened here.
Can we go back one more?
Okay.
And then just
Yeah. And then click it again, right?
I think so.
Just like if I am recognized the origin of this Krishna consciousness movement, that means I know everything directly and indirectly of all this movement. If I do not know directly and indirectly everything on this movement, then I cannot become the founder Acharya. And as soon as the origin becomes a knower, he is life.
As soon as the origin becomes a knower, he's life. As Krishna is the origin and life of his creation, so our founder Acharya is the origin and life of his ISKCON mission. He's the soul of ISKCON. So, and now as a kind of balancer to that, we have the last slide. Okay, so who would like to read? I don't think I know your name.
Sripati Devi Dasi.
Sripati Devi Dasi. Can you see the screen? Okay, you want to read that?
Srila Prabhupada, our founder Acharya. As ISKCON's founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada is the life and soul of all generations of his followers. Moreover, whoever enriches our foundational identity as Prabhupada Nugas is also glorious. Deepening the cooperation will need to take Prabhupada and Lord Chaitanya's mission of Krishna consciousness to every town and village on earth.
Jai, so just because we're focusing on Prabhupada as founder Acharya doesn't mean we're neglecting or minimizing anybody else. Anybody who helps me, or you, or any of us, come closer to Prabhupada is a kind of guru for us. We should all really be gurus for each other. And we become glorious as we glorify Prabhupada together. So, it's time for Q&A. And again, if you weren't here in the beginning, we're going to do one more day after Sunday the 20th, lesson 10. On Monday the 21st morning, I'm just going to sit here and we'll have open Q&A for the whole time because already I'm behind your questions. I haven't been able to answer all your questions. So save up the questions you didn't get a chance to ask. And I will also make the student notes available again. If you just email Jesse, he'll send you a folder, a zip folder of the notes, the student notes for all the lessons, all the points. So you don't have to miss out. Okay, I'm just going to sit down. That's one of the longer lessons, and I did skip some things in the script just so we can have a little Q&A. Okay, let's talk about your verse.
And you were talking about how Srila Prabhupada in 1974 started really talking about and writing down that I am the founder Acharya.
He had to reassert what he already had said in the directions of management, which is in the database, that he's the founder of Acharya. But somehow they didn't click. You know, people didn't really understand the full import of that. I mean, naturally, we were just kids still trying to learn how to control ourselves. So he felt obliged to do that officially.
Yeah, so that was the beginning of my sentence. So the rest of my question is, what precipitated that was that he was being minimized and it was coming from India. Can you clarify or put in a nutshell what that was?
Yes, but not right now.
Okay.
It comes up dramatically. Which lesson? Fictional Prabhupadas. The first fiction is, Prabhupada is God! That actually happened. I walked into my first festival a month after I joined in July and August in New Vrindavan, famous, 1970. This was the preaching from the newly minted sannyasis Prabhupada had created. But why they were saying that, that's another story. And it has its origins in envy from India. So let's let it come up in context, and it's very dramatic. And He just expelled them. He just kicked them out. But you'll see that. Yeah, that's good. I saw Jesse.
Yes, Prabhu, thank you. So, just a quick question about the, we were just talking about the pranam mantra.
Yeah.
And I saw that it was written as Namaste Saraswate Deve. And so recently, I guess there's been some discussion about that it's possibly a mistranslation, or that when we say this pranam mantra, instead we should say Saraswate Devam.
Oh,
So would you comment on that?
yeah, when the mantra was first distributed, circulated by Prajumya, who was Prabhupada's Sanskrit editor, that may have been the first way, because grammatically it can be said either way, grammatically. But then Prabhupada, because they asked Prabhupada that, is it Devam or Deve? So Prabhupada said, it's either way, but Deve rhymes with the other one, Gauravani Pracharanya, so why not be euphonic? Why not be a little mellifluous and harmonic, poetic? So, but you can say Deva, and you hear Vishnu Jan Maharaj say it on tapes. Namaste Saraswate Devam, and they're all saying it, But it's just like, is it Krishna Bhakti or Vishnu Bhakti? Well, the Skanda Purana says Vishnu Bhakti, but Prabhupada said you can say either. This is the kind of stuff that create new denominations and religions. No, it's Krishna. It's the age of fanaticism. Okay, so no.
I have a couple of them. One, Mother Cavalli made something about Prabhupada. He exerted the founder Acharya title in the document of management, I believe. That's what it was called.
That's the first.
So, but then you said the second one, he reaffirmed it.
Yeah.
So where did he reaffirm it? Where did he write that?
No, he told the GBC after this, unauthorized sale of the temple, where everything was getting too wild. Prabhupada said, we have to have an amendment. You have to make an amendment, and I'll write it, and you put it into proper English, and then I'll see it, and then that'll be...
So it went into that same document?
Yeah, if you go into the database, you'll see an amendment.
But is that document a legal document anywhere?
Yeah.
I believe it's used in the Los Angeles Temple, for someplace in their articles of incorporation or something.
Well, that's the yeah. Well, they were all, I don't have the legal details. I guess you have to ask what's his name? Harvey Mechanic, what's his name?
Harvey Mechanic.
Argendra. Yeah. They were all, Prabhupada was very proper. It's like when he did his will, his final will in 77, he knew he had to do that and make it all legal so nobody could usurp his con. We'll discuss that too when we come to the will. It's right there. It's in the database too.
Okay. Can I ask a couple more if they're quick enough?
Let's see.
On Monday.
8:52. So yeah, you're the president, so you got the bully pulpit.
Okay. When you were talking about the Lord Chaitanya's movement going underground in the 18th, 19th century,
17th, 18th, yeah,
19th century. At the same time, that's when the British first came to India and they first came to Bengal, and they basically founded Calcutta. I was wondering how much of this, the forcing of bhakti underground and the contamination of Lord Chaitanya's movement, how much maybe was a result of the British Raj?
That's a good question, because the British have been expert to this day. They're very expert in propaganda and dividing and conquering. When you hear about Lord Chaitanya's movement being submerged, you only hear, I've only heard of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, talking about how those Upasampradayas, the owls, the bowels, Saki Bekis, Garanga Nagari, etc., Sahajas, they did it. It was from the inside. And from our perspective, it was another angle is Mahaprabhu allowed that to happen. So the West could get it together to make all the technology so eventually it could go all over the world. there is one book called Hindu Encounter with Modernity by Shukavat. Have you ever read that book?
I know Sukavat, but I don't know that specific book.
Yeah. If it would be anywhere, it might be in there. But I read that book. I don't recall that happening. But certainly, when the British went to India and they discovered the Bhagavad Gita, and at first they were very impressed by the Gita, but then they realized that if they wanted to really conquer India, they had to debunk the religion and the culture. So then they started having contests of who could do that the best, using their own texts. And so that's an indication that the British were fully capable of at least attempting that. But I don't personally know historically. I don't have any record of that. But Gokul Ranjan, right?
There's 2 places and 2 lectures I've heard over the last year, and one of them was in Vrindavan, and I believe it's like 76 or 77, and he specifically says that Darwin was commissioned, or I don't know if he says commissioned, but he said he read the Padma Purana where it's described the transmigration of the soul from one species to another, and that's where the theory of evolution came. And they were trying to debunk, our Siddhanta and take out the spirit, take out the soul.
Well, there you go. That's an example. We have to connect a few more dots to know if that was explicitly to, help them subdue the Indians. And
instead, it's almost debunked Christianity.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't just... In fact, that's what the atheistic people celebrated. Once Origin of Species came out in 1859, T.H. Huxley, at last we've got this monkey called God off our back. There's another explanation for creation and life and all this stuff. So the atheistic temperament was exulting in Darwin's work. Of course, Darwin himself was a little more honest. And if anybody can show that this and this and this, then my theory is shot to pieces. And since then, other people have exposed the holes in Darwin's theory. So now they have Darwinians, who are trying to shore up the paradigm.
There's also devotees who say that Darwin's theory is the origin of species and not the origin of life. He doesn't touch upon the origin of life, he's touching upon where the species have evolved from.
Right, Darwin started with what we call Visarga, secondary creation, not Sarga, the origin.
And that's what Prabhupada said he did. That's what he read, I remember him saying Padma Purana.
Padma Purana, that's exactly right. That's where you get a lot of stuff about the species, also Markandeya Purana. And what is a species? In Darwin's paradigm, it's if 2 male and female can mate and you can produce offspring, that's a species. But, for example, we hear that there's 400,000 species of human life.
Really?
So, yeah.
Yeah, but that includes devas and siddhas, and it's not just humans.
Okay, but even on this planet, you can see different levels of consciousness. It's a spiritual thing. It's a level of consciousness that's obviously integral to the definition of species. I don't know that the actual slope or whatever that's defining a species, but it's not material. It has to do with consciousness, levels of consciousness.
Can I hit you with one more thing?
Sure, one more thing.
The Prabhupada signing his sannyasi name on those corporate papers, which are extended view, if I make the statement that if Prabhupada would have signed Abhay Charande on corporate papers, then after he left the world, his family would have maybe, because they took Prabhupada's movement to court trying to gain the access.
They tried to. Yeah.
They would have had a lot better case if his legal name would have been signed on those papers.
That's another story. And I have a story about that going to court, and it's pretty amazing. Prabhupada, he saw everything that could happen and sometimes did happen. So he made plans for every contingency. I have a real amazing story about when one of Prabhupada's sons, M.M. Day, Mathura Mohan, tried to do that. and how Prabhupada's prescience, his foresight, prevented that through one devotee in Mayapur. So, but that's getting late. Okay. So thank you for coming. We finished. Oh, wait a minute. This is why we're going to have one whole day for all the unanswered questions. We have one more question. Go ahead.
Just one more?
Yeah.
There. You're talking about the stroke. I don't remember details. My mind doesn't remember that. But sometimes I watch on the computer different devotees giving the remembrances. And I think it might have been Ramananda saying how that, when that weird doctor was there or something, that he gave Prabhupada the instruction how he should walk more. And how he was saying how that was an important thing.
That's true.
That was happening, the morning walk that Prabhupada would have with his disciples. So I was
That's the goal from the filthy place. Yeah. The guy was not helpful except it was one thing Prabhupada would say later, massage and walks. This is what's keeping me alive. So that suggestion came from that doctor. And Prabhupada started his morning walks, you're right. So if you have more questions, just keep saving them, and we'll have a whole hour and a half just for question and answer.
It's amazing that you can remember. I mean, you've done this enough and you've researched it enough that you can remember. Somebody asks a question from class 1 or class 6, and you can actually, you have it so assimilated that you can respond to the question without looking at so many notes to find out what they're talking about.
Practice makes perfect. One time Prabhupada was playing his belly like a drum. New Vrindavan was playing his belly like a drum, May 1969. And it sounded just like a drum. He's playing on his ribcage. And the massager said, Prabhupada, how did you learn how to do that? And Prabhupada said, practice.
Well, can I just say one quick that in Atlanta when he came, he was teaching us the beat for Parama Karuna. It was a 1-2 beat, and no one could do it. So he played the drum that night to himself singing, the recording of himself singing. So afterwards, Srila Kirti, when he's walking back to his quarters, Srila Kirti Prabhu says, Prabhupada, everyone's amazed how expert you are at playing the mridanga. And he says, well, I've been playing for 80 years. I should be.
Yeah, so that's encouraging. Okay, we better end now. See you tomorrow morning, or see you at the Sunday program. Actually, I will be hibernating on my marathon, but I will come to honor prasadam.
With the feet, you're going to come down.
Yeah, I'm going to cover the feast. With, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.